Okay, looking at today's learning plan. We're on learning plan 3 today. Make sure that's correct. January 31st, learning plan 3, we're covering chapter 1. In chapter 1, the objectives right in the beginning of the chapter is explain the function of a server operating system, describe the additions of Windows Server, discuss the core technologies of Windows Server, explain the primary roles of Windows Server, and then describe the new and enhanced features in Windows Server. And if you're not familiar with Windows Server or Windows Server 2003 in the previous versions, then new and enhanced features, any feature of Windows 2008, not only new and enhanced, would be new and enhanced to you. So it's only if you had some background with that. You read this a couple weeks ago. Hopefully you remember it. We're talking about it. Does anyone have any questions to begin with on the chapter? Does anyone have any questions on your installation of your server? You had to reinstall yours last night. There is one feature in VMware Workstation that I do want to review. I believe I brought it up the first week when I handed out the VMware software. It has to do with making sure there's a specific setting that needs to be switched on every computer that you're using. Now, Gordy's room and my room should be the same. I think there's a minor item that we changed in Gordy's room, but we can do that pretty easily. But looking at some of your network address translation your network address translation, network address. Okay, that's long. So take notes of this. If you open up VMware Workstation, and again, because we're working in a virtual, in our own little private virtual network, and so just like at home, you have a 192.168.1.0 network at home, and then you have a NATed router that goes out to your internet service provider, so you have one IP address that goes out there. Everybody, we could have 5 or 10 or 15 of you all having that same IP address scheme at home, just because it's a standard router configuration. We're doing the same thing here in that we're creating our servers and our clients using a certain IP addressing scheme. And since servers have static IP addresses, you'll be able to use it at home and making sure that we have the same network that's following us. So in VMware Workstation, this is an application setting, not a virtual machine setting. So you don't have to change this on your server and then your client and then your XP and your Linux or whatever like that. It's not a virtual machine setting. It's a workstation software application setting. Under Edit, in the upper left-hand corner, if I go under Edit, Virtual Network Editor, it should bring up your different networks. And during the installation process, you're given the option of having a bridge network or host only or NATed. And in this class, we're using NATing so that we can have our consistent network wherever we go. And specifically what address we're working with, that's down the bottom. So our private side of that NATed network is supposed to be 192.168.118.0. When you install VMware Workstation, it will randomly assign you one. So if you install this at home, it could be 120, it could be 87, it could be 236, it could be 3. So it's going to randomly select that. Now, if you think about this, if I have an IP address of 192.168.118.110, that was our server that we made last week. So that's a 118.10, and say it's on a 230.0 network, it's not going anywhere. It'll function within that network if you have other static addresses, but it's not getting out to the internet. And all those other computers, like your Windows 7 client that we'll be working with, that's using DHCP. Well, DHCP is going to be giving addresses based on that 118, on that one, or whatever, the 230 network, and we really need to be in 118. So hopefully understand IP addressing and network addresses and why we have them that work this way. If not, that's a great networking 1, networking 2, networking 3 conversation to have. Do you have any questions on how that works with addressing? I'm seeing some perplexed looks. I'm not sure if it has to do with addressing or it has to do with life in general. Jesse, you have a question. You have a question? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that at home and at school, now you can't change anything at school because it's going to revert back. So the room is set this way as 192.168.118.0. And yes, at home, you would have to set this on your computer. The 118 number. It's already going to have 192.168 and then something .0. And it needs to be 118. Yes. Absolutely. I have VMware Workstation 9 and the serial number for it. And there's like 250 days left on it. It was a year license. It's good through next fall. So yeah, definitely during break or something, come and see me and I'll get that to you. Otherwise, if other people, who has a copy of it, VMware Workstation 9 and the serial number. Okay, so you can get it from me or from Marsha or whatever's convenient. So at 250 megs, so it's nothing huge, so it fits on a jump drive. So other questions on VMware Workstation? Other questions on your server? Okay, let me go open my server. Virtual machines. Server 1 and Windows Server 2008. Yeah, that's what I want. Sometimes you have so many different virtual machines, it's hard to keep track. That's why a good name is important. So I'm going to power this on. And when we created it using a network address translation network adapter. We gave it a static IP address of, I believe, 118.110. Is that correct? It should be in your notes of what you typed in, and should be the top of your page. Look at that, a binder with Windows Server on the front of it. And what's your username? Whatever came up. More specifically, administrator. Yes, it does come up, a little icon, but there's times that's going to just be blank fields. So you have to know the username is administrator, and password is capital P, password 1. Starting up my server, and then we can get into chapter 1. As a reminder, Control-Delete, don't do Control-Delete when you see Control-Delete. Instead, you have two options. One is to go under VM and send a Control-Delete, or a little bit more keyboard-friendly thing. If you're used to doing the keyboard instead of doing Control-Delete, you just slide your finger over a key or two and do Control-Alt-Insert. Control-Alt-Insert will bring you to the Control-Alt-Delete screen. In this case, it's the login administrator, capital PASSWORD 1. And I did something wrong. Zero 1, thank you. I wasn't looking at my notes. Okay, so 0 1. And now you're on your server. It should come up automatically to, unless I close it in this one. Here we go. The initial configuration tools, and this is what we did last week during the installation. So we set the time zone. We configured networking. We can see that there's the static address of 118.210. Oh, 210. What was 110 then? Was that our core server? Okay. Core server. So it's 210. The server name is server 10 for everybody. We're part of a work group as at this point. We'll be going into a domain later on, but it's AD for Active Directory Configuration class. We enabled updates. If you ran them, great. If you didn't, that's okay. Sometimes it just took forever. And especially if you didn't have a network connection. If you had the wrong NATing settings, it doesn't work at all, amazingly. Download and install updates. I've actually never done them, I guess. And then we haven't done the roles and features yet. So that's kind of where we were with Chapter 2 with the basic installation. Everybody good with this? Okay. This would be a good time. Actually, probably while I still shut it down, I should have done this, but you can do this anytime. This would be a good time to be taking a snapshot, maybe even calling it pre-Chapter 1. That way you have, a setting before we do the stuff and activities in Chapter 1. In Chapter 1, it's mainly a look around and see what's going on type of chapter. But, if you click on something or do change something and also it's like, oh, no, I didn't want to do that, you still have a backup. So you can go completely back to this point before you did anything in Chapter 1. Starting in Chapter 1, then. We're going to be mainly concentrating on the activities in the chapter. There's a couple we'll be skipping and kind of go through that. Chapter 1, Windows Server, page 2. Windows Server 2008 is Microsoft's most ambitious server operating system update since Windows 2000 Server, because 2000 was a huge leap from its predecessor of Windows NT Server. And so 2000 was pretty big. There's a Windows Server 2003 out there, but it was very similar to 2000. I mean, it had big improvements, but it wasn't a drastic change. 2008 now is another drastic change. And then 2012 has been released. It's still coming out and things like that as far as, classes and books and that kind of stuff, and even getting implemented, but it's out there. If you're familiar with Windows 8, it's going to have a very similar look and feel as Windows 8. Maybe by the end of the semester we'll get a chance to take a look at it just to show you what it looks like. Okay, the role of the server operating system on page 2. A server is a collection of a server or collection of servers is usually at the center of most business networks, and that's why I call it the client-server network. And so the client logs onto the server, and the server controls everything, what you can do, even if you can access the network or not. The functions of a server provides depends on a number of factors, including the type of business using the server, size of the business, and the extent to which the business has committed to using technology to aid its operations. And, how you use this conflicts with the company. Server, is it a hardware or software? What's your thoughts? Software. Okay. What's that? Both? Okay. What makes it software or what makes it both? What do you mean by hardware? Yeah, we can have a server class hardware, but hardware is sort of in the lesser degree of the hardware-software debate type thing. It is definitely the software that makes something a server. I can take my tablet and make it a server by putting server software on. Well, what's server software? What do you mean by server software? Okay, specifically in this case, like Active Directory roles and print servers and that kind of stuff. But very generically, what's a server? Okay, it can be stripped down, but it can also be very robust. So how large or how small it is really wouldn't do it. What's the basic function of a server software? Services. It's something that provides services. Now, if you're familiar with Windows itself, there's lots of services running. There's network services, there's file services, there's sharing services, there's print services, there's update services. And as soon as you are doing services or providing services to others, somebody's be able to access your stuff and do something with it, it becomes a server. So again, on my laptop, I could run, well, in fact, I am running server software. And in fact, Windows 7 by itself is essentially a server. If somebody logs onto my server for sharing a simple file, I have now become a server. And you can become very, very complex and very large, or very, very small. Definitely having the hardware to support that and the redundancy in a server class environment would be very important. But really, the software is what's supporting it. It gets into different versions of Windows Server 2008. Just like all things Microsoft, we can't have 3 versions. We have to have 10, because the difference between Business Ultimate is got to be completely different than Business Premium with extra add-ons, whatever. There's only 5 editions, I guess 4 editions. There's the Standard, Enterprise, Data Center, and then Web Server. Standard is very, 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 very basic. It's for the very small office, home office. I have never seen anybody install or use Standard Edition. Data Center is kind of the opposite extreme. That is for the extremely large, like mega. That too I've never seen installed or used by anybody. Everybody in the world that I've ever seen and worked with has used Enterprise. The very specific version is the Web Server Edition, if you're running it just as a web server. And I've not seen anybody do that one either. So Enterprise is sort of the standard one. So it does talk you through all those, and even Web Server Edition. And then you can compare those editions. Kind of going to system properties, comparing the editions, it talks about the different requirements. But activity 1-1 on page 5, it says reviewing the system properties. You want to view the system properties of Windows 2008. You need to find some basic information about your installations, such as the server edition, processors, RAM, and so forth. So just like you could see the properties of a regular Windows operating system, let me close this. And when I do that, another screen should come up for Server Manager. And you might get annoyed with this. It's like, why does this keep popping up? Let's just get rid of it and close it for good. This is actually a good thing. This is what you do everything with. And so typically when you log onto the server, this is where you're going to go anyway. So having this come up is just leave it for now. You know, close it for now, but don't say close forever and don't pop up anymore. The same way as in Windows, I can click on Start and then right-click on Computer and go to Properties. And it's going to give me a lot of information about it. There are 4 sections. It talks about the Windows Edition, the system computer name, Windows activation, which mine is not, 53 days to activate, and so forth. Make it know the processors that's running the system type. It's a 32-bit operating system. You probably have a different processor showing up on your machine. Sure. How about that? Is that better? Okay. Hope you can follow. Let's close back again. If you click on Start, right-click on Computer, just like in every other version of Windows that you've ever owned, and go to Properties, and gives you this information. We're just following step-by-step in Activity 1-1 on page 6. Page 6, Activity 1-1. Click Start, then right-click on Computer, then click on Properties. Be familiar with the task on the left-hand side. It says, realize that Device Manager is also here. So, you know, there's multiple ways of getting to Device Manager. This is one of them. If I click on Device Manager, it brings up Device Manager. I have no warnings or errors, so that's a good sign. If I go to remote settings, I come up to the system properties, computer name, hardware, remote, which if I go to advanced settings is the same screen, just a different tab. Remember last week, this is where we changed the computer name. Typing in here does not change the computer name. It happens all the time. Down here is where you click change to change the computer name. Here's some hardware information, which again gets you device manager, Windows Update drivers, and then advanced and remote. And we'll be talking about those in other classes. We can cancel that. Windows Server 2008 core technologies, the new features and enhancements that they've added are getting all the attention. Before you can understand the new features, however, you need to have a firm grasp of the technologies that form the foundation of the operating system. Starting right at the beginning is NTFS, New Technology File System. It's been around for several years. In fact, that may be the only operating system that you even may be familiar with as far as the Windows operating system. FAT's been around forever. You might still be familiar somewhat with that, but NTFS has been the primary Windows operating system for many years by now. Just taking a look at some of the NTFS stuff. View NTFS file permissions and attributes. This is the first time using Windows with an MTS formatted disk. So you want to familiarize yourself with the few capabilities of the file system. We're on the top of page 7. We want to go to Start and then Computer and then click Explore. So just like we went to Properties, I can click on Start, right-click on Computer, and then go to Explore. And these are my drives. Again, just like Windows 7, just like Windows XP, Vista, very similar to Windows 8, I guess, but we'll stick with past ones. If I click on the C drive, if I right-click on the C drive and go to Properties of it, you get the information about the drive. Verify that NTFS is listed for the file system. If it's not formatted, ask your instructor which drive is formatted for NTFS, and yours is. The next tab they want you to just look at for the exercise is the Security tab. So click up there. Click each on the group or usernames listed and view the permission settings for each at the bottom. Here's the creator or the owner. Here's the different permissions. If I click on System, you can see that they have they're actually allowed to do things. The administrators have all as well, and then the users have certain ones. This will make more sense when we get into it. That's what the class is all about, working with this kind of stuff. We'll work more with that. Working on quotas. So quotas tells who can do what. Quotas says how much can you do there. Quotas can be important at this level. You can't have somebody take up the whole disk space to do that. Let's see here. What else do they want us to do? The shadow copies tab. Next, they want to talk about. This features yet another one that requires NTFS. Right now it's disabled. Shadow copies allows users to view the contents of a shared folder as the contents existed at previous points in time, and you can get more information there. What else? Let's see. Go back to the General tab. Note the 2 checkboxes. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Correct. Contents exist at a previous point in time, so like yesterday or a week ago. So somebody messed something up, or you made a major revision and you got rid of something, and this is like, oh, what did I have there? So you can do that. And right now you can see it's disabled. There's 0 shares anyway. I'm not sure if we get into that in this book, or if it's the next book. I have 2 books with the 2 classes. There's the 640 exam and the 646. 640, that's the book that you're going through next semester. Whoever's in networking, in the fall you're taking Server 2. It's just the 646 exam. And So the two really go hand in hand, and it's really hard keeping them separate at some point. So yes, I don't know how it's stored. I have no idea how it's stored. That's an excellent question. I don't know. Yeah, the question was, if I have revisions, am I saving the entire file? So if I have a 10 meg Word document, am I doing like 5 copies of this 10 meg file, or is it just the incremental changes, or what's this? It's called a delta change, is what's called. Is it just that? And that's a great question. I don't know that. If we get into this book, we'll talk about it. If not, we can research it and do it, look at it as well. By the way, who's in networking, the networking program? Okay, and support people. You can take Windows Server 2 as an elective if you're just looking for something else to take, because it'll be so much fun, because you can learn more about it. So, what's that? Well, do both. You can do both. You can graduate in May and take a class. We have lots of students that do that. So talk to your employer once you get a job, and they'll even pay for it probably. Or give you money towards it. Okay, moving along. Let's see here. General tab again. There's 2 checkboxes on it. Enable indexing and compression. Index this drive for faster searching. It does make a huge difference if you're indexed. Unfortunately, indexing, it's gotten better in 2008, can take a processor utilization and hard drive. Also, you're like, what is going on? And you realize that the indexing services is sort of just taking over and doing everything. But man, when you're searching for something, you can tell a huge, huge difference. The second thing is compress this drive to save disk space. It's essentially using a zip. Is anybody familiar with zipping a file? You take a file and you use an algorithm to represent the same information but differently, and you represent it differently in a smaller format. It takes time to compress it and time to decompress it, though. So compression does give you more disk space. So out of that 10 meg Word document, well, it might only take up 7 megs if I compress it. The downside is that the operating system then is compressing and decompressing on the fly all the time, and that can be, slowing things down. But it gives you more disk space. Disk drives these days are relatively super cheap. We just add more data. We just add more storage to it instead of really doing with compression. That's why it's off by default. Let's see here. Those features are not available with that, by the way. Close the Properties dialog box. And let's see, now it wants to click on the Documents icon. So click on Documents. On your favorites link, right-click the right pane, point to New, and click Text Document. Press Enter to accept the default name, New Text Document. So in this open area, I click New, right-click, New Text Document, and it says New Text Document, so I just hit Enter. There's my document. If I look at that document now, I can see what some properties I have as an NTFS file in an NTFS file system. If I look at the properties of it, notice the 2 checkboxes at the bottom again with the attributes of read-only and hidden. They're common for both FAT and NTFS. If I click Advanced, though, there are some things that are only available in NTFS. There are 4 more boxes. Only the archiving attribute is ready for archiving. Is in fact, the other 3 are only available in NTFS, which is indexing, compression, or encryption. So again, NTFS is just huge, and the biggest advantage of NTFS is security. User security, file security, and also large files. FAT has a limit as far as how big you can put a file on there. So questions on files, the file system, or just the computer in general so far. How did I get to the last, next to attributes in the bottom? It says attributes, read-only, and hidden. And those you should be, have you been familiar with those already? Using the trib command, or what, like in computer concepts or anything with attributes? How many of you are familiar with attributes? Raise your hand. Yes, I know attributes. Raise your hand really high. How many of you, okay, raise your hand if like, what's an attribute? Okay, got one. And that leaves like 6 people who didn't want to vote. Okay. Okay. Well, let's just spend a few minutes on that. It's a kind of a shorter overview chapter, so we have some flexibility on here. If I mark something as read-only, so this file is read-only right now. If I click OK, the document should be read-only, which means if I click on it and hit delete, it'll say, do you want to move this to the recycle bin? I click yes, and it should not allow me to do it. Now, I'm an administrator, and so administrator doesn't care. And so that's kind of a bad example. So if I was a normal user, unfortunately, it's just administrator can do things that you normally shouldn't be able to do. Why? I don't know. So let me just get my text document and put it back. So that's what's supposed to happen as a normal user. We'll create normal users later on, and you'll see how this stuff works. So if I go to properties again, I can also make it hidden. And if I'll take off the read-only since it's not doing things as administrator. If I click apply, and now it's gone. Well, it's not really gone, it's just hidden. I can't see it. Well, what do I do now if I can't see a file? Yeah, and how do I do that? Okay, where's that? Okay. Folder options. The view tab up on top. And if I scroll just about bottom of the first page, it says hidden files and folders. Do not show hidden files and folders, or show them. And now you click apply, and now I can see my hidden file. So once again, it's only somewhat useful. By default, it is hidden. People can't see it, but you can turn it on. Now, it does look a little different. Let me make a new text document. I don't know if you can tell on your screen or not. The hidden file is a little lighter. I don't know if you can tell that or not, if it shows up on your screen or not, but it's darker for a non-hidden one, and this one's hidden, so it's, you know, it's a little bit lighter, showing that it's hidden, but still obviously completely available. Now, the other attributes that we work with, the advanced ones, I'm going to unhide this one, and now it becomes dark again. If I go to the other attributes, the first one is the file is ready for archiving. That means it's ready if a backup program ran right now, a standard traditional backup utility. It usually backs things up based on the archive file. So what does that mean? So I come across and a file was just created. So it says this file is ready for archiving. So I come across and I back up this file. As a backup program, I turn off the archive bit then. Because, you know, if I do that, you know, I backed it up and I come back tomorrow, do I really need to back up the same file again tomorrow? Nothing's changed on it. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. So nothing happens to this file. I don't make 50 copies of the same file if it never changes. So it goes around, goes around, goes around. And if I look at it still, if I go to the properties and I go advanced, it's nothing's there. Now say I go in, it's just like, oh, I'm a user. I come in, it's like, let me add something to this. And I close it. Shouldn't be that difficult. There we go. And I want to save it. So I just save the document. So now when the backup comes, is it going to back it up or not? Well, let's check out the archive bit. And that's actually what these are. These are just individual bits. It's an A, H, and R. If I go to properties, this is really pokey. The archive bit automatically gets turned on anytime there's a change that happens. And so now the next time, so it's been 50 days since the last backup for this specific file, now comes up, sees, oh, that file changed because the archive bit got tripped on, and now I back it up and then I turn it off. So those are the basic ones that you work with on all the file systems. If you do this in the command line, oh, okay. I can remember these. If I go cd / to get to the root, I should have my, where are my documents? Oh, I'm in the documents directory, administrator documents. So cd user, cd administrator, and cd documents. So here's my documents. If I use the attrib command, attrib, it'll show you which which bits are active. So all of them have the archive bit on them. And actually there's a system and a hidden file called your desktop.ini. So that's a system file as well. Now if I did something to this, like if I made this hidden again, now it's showing that that file is hidden and the archive bit's gone. Why would the archive bit be gone? I'm not sure. So you can turn it on and off through checkboxes, or you can turn them on and off through the command line. So attrib new text document dot text. Actually, I think I have to put that in quotes. Well, this is testing my command line skills. Plus minus H. So I'm going to take off the hidden. And I got rid of the hidden. If I want to add hidden back, I use the plus H and maybe do a plus R as well. And now I did hidden and, plus R for read only. I did hidden and read only. So those are attributes, and those are available in FAT and NTFS. Those are very, very, very common ones. Other attributes, working with the advanced just for NTFS, again, compression. So instead of compressing the entire disk, I'm compressing the specific file only, or encrypt a specific file, or I want to index or not index the specific file. Again, we're looking at the drive before. As a whole, are we indexing and compressing, and now we're talking about individual files. You can turn those on and off. Make sense? Attributes are very important. You should know those. So, we're going to get into a couple back-to-back labs using MMCs and then using them, management tools, to compare different things. So why don't we take a break now, and then what I'm going to do is just let you work in groups on a couple of these to sort of just go through some of those activities because they're going right back to back. Any questions on what we've covered so far? Nothing really new, just seeing it on a server instead of on a desktop. Okay, take a break. Okay, I'm going to have you work in groups in the next couple of activities. Activity 3, 4, 5, and even 6, and 7. So they're all right back to back. One thing you're going to need, though, is a couple additional drives to work with. And I'm going to enable those for you right now, and I'll show you how to do this on your virtual machine so you can follow along, because you need an extra drive to play with. To add extra drives to your system, virtual machines are kind of nice. They're almost like hot swappable drives. You can add drives on, while it's running. To do that, let me cancel out all of these things. I go to VM. I can go to Settings. And these are my virtual machine settings that I'm working with. And I can add components or devices down the bottom. So go ahead and click Add. And what do I want to add? I want to add a hard drive. And that is the default, it's on top of the list. So I click Next. Now, I'm not going to use an existing virtual disk or a physical disk. I want to create a new virtual disk. So I'm building a new hard drive virtually. And I click Next. And the default is SCSI. Only SCSI drives can be added. We'll put VMs powered on, which is fine. My other drive is SCSI as well. I click Next. And then I have a 40 gigabyte disk. Actually, I think I can do it this way. Yeah, that should be the FAT32. Because we need to add a FAT32 drive to this in one of your activities. A maximum size is 40 gigs, and it's your option whether multiple files or a single file. I'll just keep the default of multiple files this time. And I click Next. Don't change the location or the name of your disk file. You certainly can, but just keep things the default and click Finish. So now you have two hard drives on there. You have a 40 gig, your original one, and then a new 40 gig. And if you click OK, that's what you can do. If I click on Start, they have administrative tools right on the main menu bar because this is a server, and that's what we do is administrative type things. And if you go over to Computer Management, and this is the same in Windows 7, by the way, or Windows XP. It's just under Accessories, Administrative Tools. And then underneath here is Disk Management. Okay. Let me back up. Click on Start, Administrative Tools, then Computer Management. And then underneath the Computer Management, you have Storage, then Disk Management. If I click on Disk Management down here, I should see my additional drive. And it's unallocated. And then the steps in the lab will walk you through the rest, but just so you have that extra drive to play with. Don't format this one. This is your operating system. You format it, everything goes away. Not a good idea. This is the one you get to play with. So it asks for disk 0 or disk 1 or whatever it's going to be. That's what you're going to work with. So, okay. I want you working with a group of people. What page is what? The activities. It's activity 1-3 is the first one. It's on page 9. So you're going to do page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, and then ending on 13. And they're all sort of back-to-back things. Using a pre-built MMC. By the way, these are MMCs, like computer management or administrative tools. It's bringing tasks together. And then you get to create a custom MMC. You can add and remove the snap-ins in the MMC. And then we have disk management, which we're looking at right now, but they're going to walk you through actually using it. And then comparing NTFS and FAT32, our drive C is NTFS. Our second drive is going to be FAT32, so you get to do some comparison. And then it's going to show some sharing a folder in Windows Server. And if you've ever shared a folder anywhere else, it's very, very similar. It's just, some of the screens just look a little bit different, but it's the same concept. They just look a little bit different. So I'm going to give you probably until the next break, until 10 o'clock, to work on those 5 labs. If I see that everybody's done before then, we'll start on something else new. Other than that, we'll just probably give you like half an hour, 35 minutes to work on those 5 labs. And I'll be wandering around answering questions, so please ask questions. If you say, oh, I prefer to work alone, too bad. I'm not giving you that choice. You are working with somebody. So find somebody to work with you. And if you want to work with 3 people, that's perfectly fine as well. You all need to actually do it, but please walk through them and do them together. with somebody else. In fact, if you want to work on one computer, that's fine. If you both look at the same computer, because then you're actually working together. Just take turns driving. And the person that is least comfortable, like saying, oh, I don't get any of this, you do this, well, then that means that you should actually be doing it. So if you feel uncomfortable, drive. And repeat the exercises. If you want to do it more than once, do it more than once. Let everybody have a chance to do it, but work together. Remember that you have a snapshot created. If all of a sudden you get really far into this, it's like, wait a second, what happened? I can go back to snapshot and then revert to my pre-chapter 1 snapshot. Remember, however, you're not going to have a physical drive 2 anymore. So you'd have to recreate drive 2. In fact, you could create one right now. Added second drive. So now a snapshot right when I created a blank second drive. Okay. Just put this on your screen for a minute. Just to review again, I think everybody's gone through this already, but just to get it out there, on activity 1-5, when setting up a new volume, for disk 1 is the one that we'll be working with. You need to right-click on it and put it on line, and then right-click and then initialize. And that's the important part, is initializing it. And then you'll just be able to go back and then finish the activities the way it talks about. If I right-click on the open area, then it's a new simple volume. Next, it says 500 megabytes. We're not putting anything else on the volume, so you could actually make the full size. And then click Next. We're going to assign the letter S to it. And what else are we going to do with it? What are we naming the volume? FAT32 volume. FAT32 vol. To change it to FAT32. I can name it whatever I want. And let's see. Yeah, that's good. So I finished it. So it's formatting. It's a virtual hard drive, so it goes pretty quickly. And then that's where your activity then continues on with comparing NTFS and FAT32. What may happen then after formatting, if you close it, if you're all done with that, it still has that unallocated area. It may want to try to format that and saying, hey, that's not usable until you format it. And that's where it wants to do your drive E. You don't need to do this. You need to format the disk in drive E before you can use it. And again, that's just that unallocated part. It's saying that you can't use that part of the disk until you format it. Again, in activity 1-7, you won't be able to share with anybody, but please just go through all the steps. Okay, finishing up the end of the chapter here, the rest of the chapter. Let me log back into my workstation here, my server. Okay, so you did activities up through 1-7. Just getting you familiar with some of the basic things of working with. And again, you've probably done some of these things in Windows. Does anyone have any questions on any of them? I think we worked through most of them. Everybody seemed to work okay with them? Okay. Windows networking concepts. Administering a Windows server requires extensive knowledge of networking components and protocols. That's why you take classes like Networking 1. That's why you have it in A+. That's why you're covering computer concepts as well. We're going to assume a lot, and we're going to rely on your knowledge of a lot of things, such as IP addressing and subnetting and network address translation, all that kind of concept. That's the extent of it. You don't have to get real deep into it, but understanding what's going on is pretty important. If you're going to be administering a network, you have to understand what's fundamentally underneath all of it. Even later on, we work with security, work with file formats, users, security, addressing, and that kind of stuff. The first thing is talking a little bit of a review, a workgroup model. That's what we are set up right now. This server is set up with a workgroup access of AD config class workgroup. Your home network is typically configured the same way. It's a small collection of computers whose users typically have something in common, such that they need to share files or printers with each other. It's a peer-to-peer network, so you might have those in offices, you might have a sales work group, or you might have a shipping department work group or something like that, so they can share resources in there pretty easily. In Windows 7 now, you have the new home group feature, sort of the same concept, makes things a little bit easier and nicer. The domain model. Windows domain is a group of computers that share common management, are subject to the rules and policies defined by an administrator, and that's what we'll be looking at, is doing that environment. And not only is it I am controlling what you're sharing, but when you're part of a domain, you are owned by that domain. You can't even leave the domain. Once you have gotten sucked into it, you're locked into. You cannot remove it. The only person who can remove your computer from the domain is the administrator or someone with administrator access. And at that point, they have complete control and access, not access, that's a strong word, complete control over your workstation of what you can and cannot do. If they decide that you shouldn't be able to use the CD-ROM drive anymore, you can't. If you can't get to the network anymore, I'll disable your network access. I can, make sure that you can't use USB drives. I can make sure that you have no icons on your desktop. I can say what things in the control panel you can change and what things you can't, if at all. So you are completely controlled when you're part of a domain. A domain controller is a Windows server that has the Active Directory installed and is responsible for allowing client computers to access the domain resources. The core component of a Windows domain is Active Directory. The Active Directory is the database. It's what keeps track of all that stuff. And before we had domains, even before Active Directory, and the domain was kind of like a flat file, just a simple structure. Active Directory just brings it to the whole next level. Those were on individual systems, so I need different accounts on different servers. Now I need to do that. I have one big database, and it manages multiple servers and multiple clients. So Active Directory is the core of everything we're doing, and that's why this book, is the beginning, like Windows Server Administration 1 is understanding Active Directory specifically. Then when you get to Server 2, it gets to some of the other features like printing and other services like that, which are also important, but Active Directory is the core. Windows networking components, obviously you have the network interface card. You won't have it's a cool network, but if no one can access it, it doesn't do much good. Network protocols, we're most familiar with TCP/IP version 4. However, realize that version 6 is out and about and very strong. We'll be concentrating on version 4 in this book still, just because it's what we're used to, and that's still what you will most likely be using, at least for a while. The network client and server software. Windows systems have both the network client software and the network server software installed. The client is the part that sends requests to a server, and then the server software is what receives those, then translates them. And you're going to say, well, I don't remember doing anything with Windows networking client. Do you? Do you install that at all? Well, this is my physical computer. Let's take a look at it and see what's underneath here. If I go to my network, if I open up my network and open the Network and Sharing Center, and I want to manage, change adapter settings. And I'm looking at my local area connection. Let's say wireless. Let's do the wired connection. Where's my wired? Oh, LTC wireless. Why is it named that? Well, that's my physical connection, my gigabit connection. Anyway, if I go there, right-click Properties. You already have Client for Microsoft Networks installed. It is a protocol, a feature that's installed automatically on all Windows computers. So yes, you do need a client, and yes, you need a server, and yes, you need client software. It's just installed by default. You can remove this, by the way. You can either uncheck it and make it disabled, or I completely uninstall it if I want. Now kind of defeats the purpose of a server environment, but you don't have to. So if you have a standalone computer, you do not need a client on it because you're not especially if you're not connecting to a Windows server. So just realizing that the client software is there, is just pre-installed for you to make your life easy. So that's on the book part of it. There's another activity dealing with exploring Windows networking components, and it's just looking at a couple things, viewing the status of your connections, kind of what I touched on going to my local machine, but you're going to do it on your server. I do want to just continue on, though, before you do the activity 1-8, and just sort of talk about a couple things for the next activity. Internet information services. Most businesses today have a presence on the World Wide Web and also often use web technologies on their internal networks as well. Windows Server 2008 provides IIS 7.0 for building both a public web server and internet. And I think you actually take that as a class, don't you? IIS. Do you take that? I'm sorry? Only networking students do that? But you take an IIS class, right? For the networking people? Thought you did. At least you did. 1 point. Doing web page development anywhere? I'll have to ask Gordy which one he teaches that in these days. Anyway, and there's some benefits and features, and they're talking about why you should use Windows Server for your web server in here. Some people agree with that. Some people disagree with that. Some of the advantages are it does integrate with Active Directory. Other people just prefer other web servers. Apache is huge. Lots and lots and lots and lots of people use Apache as their web server. Okay, the last thing that we do want to talk about is the server roles. On Windows Server Roles on page 19, a server role is a major function or service that a server performs, such as Active Directory. Probably the best known is the file server, which allows the server to share files. Along with roles are role services, which add functions to the main roles. And they're even called, and then you can add additionally server features, which provide functions that enhance or support installed roles or standalone features. This, by the way, is the most confusing part for me. As I go through and I add roles and features, it's really, like, why is this a role and why is that a feature? Well, because that's more important than that. Well, I think that's more important. So I would, from my personal opinion, that's sort of difficult realizing what area that actually falls under. You can ultimately find it. You know, it's just you might have to look under roles first, then under features or something. Hey, I want to add this service. Where do I do it? Active Directory Domain Services is obviously the role that installs Active Directory and turns the Windows Server 2008 computer into a domain controller. So right now we're just a server sitting there, and we could do simple file sharing just like really a Windows 7 computer to do. It becomes truly powerful and the main dominant force in our network as soon as we make it the domain controller. And we do that by installing the database, the Active Directory database, and running its service. Then as we have clients that join the domain, this is what controls those devices. And that's sort of the fun stuff. On page 20, there's other Active Directory related roles on there, but we have the application server, high performance integrated environment for managing, deploying, and running custom client server business applications. We're not doing any of those, but there are applications that run on servers that the client actually runs with. DHCP, something that our home routers take care of, but on a corporate environment really needs to be managed, not just given out, you know, a set of numbers, but we have to manage who they are, what addresses go out where, what ranges they're going to be, which ones are going to be assigned statically, and sort of all arranged that way. And DNS ties in very, very tightly with DHCP. Who's getting what address and keeping track of those name resolution so that we can type in our server name. server10.go2ltc.edu is going to give us our server instead of like, what's that IP address? Oh, yeah, they changed it last week. I don't remember. DNS takes care of all that for you. We're not going to get into fax servers, but Windows Server can act as a fax server as well. So a user from their desktop can send out faxes. Faxing just isn't as common as it used to be. You used to have to fax a bunch of stuff. And is your TRA stuff still have to be faxed? Yes, no, absolutely no, absolutely yes. I guess maybe it's the person you work with. Can you email it? Scan it, send it as attachment as through email? And a lot of places accept that instead of faxes, and you know, gone are the days that every house had a fax machine just for those times of needing to fax a couple things, or you know, going to a copy center to fax whatever. Yeah, there's still definitely advantages and ease of use. I put it on top of the scanner, type the phone number, and hit send, and I'm done. Now you have to scan it and you can email it, but just not having to have all those services available all the time. File services are obviously huge. That's the primary reason that we have a server. I'd say that in an environment, 90% of servers are file servers. That's why we have them, so that accounting has a place to keep their stuff. So that sales has a place to keep their stuff, and marketing has a place to keep their stuff, and keep it securely and keep it backed up. Hyper-V is an additional one on page 21, making it the basis of a virtual machine. So just like we're using Windows 7 to run VMware Workstation, you can run Windows 2008 Server as the host, run Hyper-V as a service, and then you can put virtual machines on top of that. We're not probably going to be spending a lot of time on that, if at all. One thing, it requires a 64-bit operating installation of Windows Server 2008, and we'll only put the 32-bit on. And it's just a little bit outside the scope of this class. It'd be fun to play with it. We'll see if we have time. Network policy and access services. Policies are a big part of it. Who can do what? Print services, we share printers, obviously. Terminal services, that's on page 22. That's definitely an up and down technology. Really, really hot for a while, then not so much for a while, and then hot again, and it keeps coming back and forth, back and forth. Terminal services enables users and administrators to control Windows desktop remotely or run applications hosted on a Windows server remotely, and the latter is probably the most common, so that salespeople can log in and get a remote session or get an instance of a desktop that's actually hosted on a computer. UDDI services, Universal Description Discovery Integration, manage, catalog, and share web services. We're not doing much with web. I have not done much with web on the server stuff, so that's kind of a foreign language to me. We already talked about IIS being one, and then Windows Deployment Services, how we can roll out applications quickly and easily across the whole enterprise. There's some cool features and some add-on projects that make that really, really nice. So those are the major functions and features of servers and the services to that make up a server. How we manage all that is on page 23, called Server Manager. And it's a single one-stop shop for all the stuff that we're doing. Since this is a server, if you notice down your quick launch right next to your start button, the little icon with, I don't know, it looks like a server with a toolkit next to it, is your Server Manager. Every time you log on, or actually I shouldn't say log on, but every time you restart your computer, it launches automatically. It does bring it up. But even if you do close it, the launch is right there. Also under Start, I can go to Administrative Tools, and I have Server Manager here as well. We talked about roles and features. That's where this stuff comes in. We're not going to play with those. We're not going to add things today. We'll be doing that next time. But if you look under roles, you can see what roles, 0 of 16 roles are installed. Add a role or add a feature. Then you can see what features and what roles you have. So the rest of the chapter after that activity deals with looking at server core, which we already looked at last week, so you get a feel of what that looks like and how you interact with it. And then it also talks a little bit more about Hyper-V. And then it's just talking about enhancements in 2008. But again, if you don't have the background, then just all the stuff we already talked about is the basis. So we're going to sort of end with your activities, activity 1.8 and 1.9 in your groups again. Before that, though, I want to ask what questions you have on the chapter. Uh-oh, that's really, really bad. So if you click on Server Manager, it doesn't run. The MMC cannot create the snap-in. Is anybody else getting that error? Really? Is it anybody? Okay, so we have 2. Anybody else? So who is on the Server Manager screen successfully? Raise your hand. He was right next to the Start button. Is an icon for Server Manager. If you click that up, Shane is getting an error or something saying, well, let's take a look at it. What is your error? And we'll unload it. And then what happens after this then? Can you do anything? Did you change anything in your MMC activity? You didn't use your computer. I have not seen this error. Go ahead and restart. I don't know. I can get you through the things the way they should work. Once we run into problems, I am not a Server 2000 expert, and I've never even seen that error, so I would have no idea how to fix it. Try restarting, see what that does. Worst case, go back to the snapshots and see if it does it. 7 updates. Could be. That's why you go back to snapshots and try it, and then the worst case, what actually wouldn't even be worse, is that, you know, it's always good to practice installing things multiple times to see, you know, how it works and installs or whatever. Yes, unfortunately, if things don't work, sometimes I can figure it out, sometimes I don't know. Okay, with that then, let me just tell you, since everybody's been leaving at different times, Learning Plan Activity 4 is out on the network for you. Oh, let me show it. I don't think you're seeing my screen. Learning Plan 4, we're going to Chapter 3. We're in Chapter 3, Introducing Active Directory. Describe the role of the directory services, install Active Directory, describe the main Active Directory objects, and explain configuring and applying group policies. So it's an introduction to it, and then the rest of the semester we get a little bit more deep into it. The pre-class activities are read Chapter 3 and then complete and submit the answers to the Chapter 3 review questions. I just have to think of this now. Do any of you like to look at PowerPoints just as a review or anything, even if I don't use them? A couple people do. Okay, I can get PowerPoints for this book, so I'll find those and I'll get those out there probably today still. And then, so if you want to look through the PowerPoints, you know, you certainly can, or print them off and use them for notes next week or something like that. I don't follow them. I don't use them. In fact, I don't even look at them half the time. I'm not a PowerPoint person. So I use them where I need them, but you know, I typically don't use them. So I'll add the PowerPoints there. Let me make a note of that. I do want you to do the review questions, and again, submit them through this link up here for Chapter 3 review questions. They're not the greatest questions, but they do get you through the material, and they are a good review. We are not doing multiple choice quizzes, fill in the blank quizzes, so they're not going to be quiz related at all. The quizzes that we do have are going to be lab sim related, where you'll have to do certain activities, but you already have done them. You just have to do them again, just to make sure you get through them. Okay, so your last activity for today then is working with your partner. Finish up those 2 lab activities, 1.8 and 1.9, I believe. Exploring the Windows networking components. And just because they limit you to certain things, they say, oh yeah, check here, check all of it. You know, this is the time to explore. It's the basis of your exploration, not the extent of your exploration. And then finally, on page 23 is exploring the server manager. Again, play with it. You know, look at all the different buttons and settings or whatever. If you happen to change anything, though, please revert back to the snapshot so that next week when we're installing Active Directory, we're all at the same spot and not having some people having some things installed and not others or whatever. So just look and explore today, but don't implement anything. So, okay, that's all that I have then, unless there's any other questions. Yes? Sure, I can show you how to add that extra hard drive again. Here's my server, and right now I have, well, I want to do it this way. Computer management, disk management. So currently I have 2. So I'm going to add another one. So I mean, by default, you only had 1. So I'll add another one. To add another one, you have to go into the virtual VMware Workstation software. So go up to VM, and then down to Settings. Settings. And then on the next page, you click Add on the bottom. And I can add another one. Why not? Add one. Click Add another hard disk. New virtual disk. Now, because it's on, it can only do SCSI, but I'll do SCSI. And next, next, and finish. I click OK. And I just installed a new hard drive. In fact, Windows just picked it up automatically right now. Do you see my screen? Yeah, okay. So right now you can see this new drive, and this is where it gets a little tricky as well. You have to put it online first. So I put it online. If I can add these while the machine is down, if I add this while it's down, it'll automatically bring it online when it reboots the computer. So it's only that I had it running. Yeah, if my server's turned off, I can add drives to it. And then when I boot my server, it's going to bring all those drives online automatically. No. Here, so I just added one while it's running. And so now I have to right-click on it and click online, and then right-click and then initialize. It should be. So we're going to try it that way. Let's go to Start and shut it down. It works now after restarting? Good. And you can see that I have 3 drives down here right now. If you saw that, it's all showing the active drive. So now while it's turned off, I can edit the virtual machine settings. And I can also go to VM settings just to stay consistent. VM settings, add a drive, add a hard drive, create a new drive. Now I can choose IDE or SCSI because it's turned off. Click Next, Next, Next. And so now I have 4 drives. And now let's power this on. And again, you can see all your physical drives and your drive activity in the lower right-hand corner, which I think is really cool. Here's my 4 drives. You can see the blinking lights, like which one's doing what. Obviously, it's loading the operating system, so the first one is blinking. Control-Alt-Insert. Oh, there we go. Not specifically. So disk management. And let's see if it's online or not. 1, 2, 3. Oh no, I still have to turn it online. Maybe it's a SCSI thing. Yeah, those should turn online. And then initialize it. Oh no, they worked. I thought it brought it online automatically, but I was wrong. It does not bring it online. You still have to write. So if you add a disk, you still have to put it online, and that may be a SCSI thing, because I don't remember doing that before, but I could have forgotten. So if we added an IDE drive, you might not have to do that. Let's try that. Let's add another drive and find out. Shut down. On your servers, by the way, if you end up reinstalling your Windows Server or any operating system, make sure that you're adding VMware tools to it. That's part of your normal installation process. When you're done, install VMware tools. That's going to be a big improvement. Okay, so I'm going to add another drive. Add a hard drive. I'm going to choose IDE this time. And then power this one on. Now I have 5 drives down here. Up on top, after the operating system is up and running, this is something you do while it's running, is you go up to VM and then install VMware tools. Now mine says reinstall because I already have it installed, but the first time it'll say install it. And then what it does, it pops up a little window that shows basically the installation process. So let's try this drive. Here we go. So this one I do not have to put online. This one's going to pop up automatically and say, do you want to initialize the disk? and which is the same screen as if I right-clicked on it, but it brought it. I didn't have to click online first. So SCSI, you have to put online. IDE, you do not have to. No, IDE, I do not have to put online. It picks it up online automatically. Yes. Yes.